My aunt said, I deserve half of what she left you, so I reminded her she didn't visit Grandma once in 5 years. We were standing in Grandma's living room, surrounded by 47 years of memories. The lawyer had just read the will. Everything went to me. The house, the savings, the jewelry. Aunt Celeste's face turned the color of overripe tomatoes. That's not fair, she hissed. I'm her daughter. You're also the person who told her she was too much work, I said. I have the voicemails. See, when Grandma's dementia started getting bad, Aunt Celeste decided it was too inconvenient for her lifestyle. She lived 20 minutes away. I lived 3 states over and still showed up every weekend. I'd drive 6 hours on Friday nights, spend Saturday and Sunday with Grandma, then drive back for my Monday shift at the hospital. Aunt Celeste came to Christmas. Once, Mom, her sister, tried mediating. Maybe we could split things more evenly? No, I said. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing, because here's what they didn't know. During one of Grandma's clear moments, about 8 months before she died, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. I'm changing my will, she whispered. Celeste thinks I don't remember her last visit, but I do. That visit happened 3 years ago. Aunt Celeste had brought her new boyfriend, trying to impress him with the family money. She'd asked Grandma right in front of him how much the house was worth. When Grandma couldn't remember, Aunt Celeste laughed, called her a vegetable, said maybe it was time to consider other living arrangements. I found Grandma crying in the bathroom an hour later. After that, I installed cameras, not to spy, but to protect her. The footage showed every missed holiday, every canceled visit, every excuse. Meanwhile, I was there for the doctor appointments, the medication changes, the 3 a.m. calls when she forgot where she was. This is elder abuse, Aunt Celeste announced, pulling out her phone. I'm calling my lawyer. Please do, I said, because I called mine 3 months ago. I'd suspected this would happen. Grandma had warned me. Celeste will fight you, she'd said during one of our last real conversations. She always does when money's involved. So I'd prepared. I had 5 years of medical records showing who attended her appointments, bank statements proving who paid for her care when Medicare didn't cover everything, and those security camera files showing 427 days where I was present and Aunt Celeste wasn't. You manipulated a sick old woman, Aunt Celeste spat. I loved her, I said quietly. There's a difference. That's when my cousin Devin walked in, Aunt Celeste's golden child, the one she actually bothered to raise properly. He looked at his mother, then at me, then at the papers scattered across Grandma's coffee table. Mom, he said slowly, when's the last time you actually saw Grandma? Aunt Celeste's face went white. Because I was here 2 weeks ago, Devin continued, and Grandma told me something interesting about her will, something about a second document. My stomach dropped. What second document? The lawyer asked, suddenly alert. Devin pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket. The one, he said, meeting my eyes, that she made me promise to open only if anyone contested the first will. The room went silent. Even the lawyer stopped shuffling papers. Devin turned the envelope over in his hands, and I could see Grandma's shaky handwriting across the seal. My name, Devin's name, and a date from 6 months ago. She called me on a Tuesday, Devin said, his voice steady. Said she needed a witness for something important. Someone from Celeste's side of the family, she specified. Someone who couldn't be accused of bias. Aunt Celeste's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I drove over that afternoon, Devin continued. Found her sitting at the kitchen table with her lawyer. She was having one of her clear days. Sharp as a tack, actually. She told me she was writing a letter. A letter that would only matter if her daughter challenged what she'd decided. He looked at his mother with something close to pity. She made me read it right there, Mom. Made sure I understood every word before I agreed to hold it. And then she made me promise on Dad's grave that I'd only open it publicly if you contested the will. That's coercion. Aunt Celeste's voice cracked. She was sick. Anything she wrote was witnessed by me, her lawyer, and her doctor. Devin interrupted. All of us ready to testify she was completely lucid that day. In fact, Dr. Patterson specifically noted her mental state in her medical records. I checked. The lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Devin, I'm going to need to see that letter. Of course. Devin broke the seal. The sound of tearing paper felt final somehow. He pulled out 3 handwritten pages, Grandma's careful cursive filling every line. She asked me to read it aloud if this moment came, so here we go. He cleared his throat. My dearest Celeste, he began. If you're hearing this, it means you've challenged my will. It means you've proven one final time that you value my money more than you ever valued me. I'm writing this on one of my good days, with witnesses present, so there can be no doubt about my soundness of mind. I want you to know exactly why I made the choices I did. Mom sank into Grandma's old armchair. Her face had gone pale. Devin continued reading. You were 4 years old when your father died. I remember holding you at the funeral, promising I'd take care of you always. And I kept that promise, Celeste. I worked 2 jobs to keep you in private school. I skipped meals so you could have dance lessons. I wore the same coat for 8 winters so you could have new clothes every season. Aunt Celeste's hands started shaking. You left for college and barely called. You graduated and moved across the country without a word. When you came back 5 years later, it was only because you needed money for your business. I gave you $50,000. You promised to pay it back. I'm still waiting. That was a gift, Aunt Celeste whispered. Let him finish, Mom said quietly. You married Raymond against my advice. I saw how he treated waitstaff, how he spoke about people he considered beneath him, but I kept my mouth shut because you were happy. When he left you 2 years later with nothing, who do you think paid your rent? Who covered your car payments? Who made sure Devin had a stable home when you were falling apart? Devin's voice caught slightly, but he kept reading. I never asked for gratitude. I just wanted my daughter back. But you were too proud to admit you needed me, and too ashamed to face what your life had become, so you stayed away. And the years passed, and I got older, and sicker, and you still stayed away. Aunt Celeste was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. But Devin didn't stop. When the dementia started, I was terrified. Not of forgetting, but of being forgotten, of becoming invisible while I was still alive. And that's exactly what happened with you, Celeste. You forgot me while I could still remember you. Do you know how that feels? To call your daughter 47 times in 1 month and get her voicemail every single time? To leave messages saying you're scared, you're confused, you need help, and never hear back? The lawyer was writing furiously. Mom had tears streaming down her face. Your sister tried. God knows Patricia tried to get you involved. She'd call you, text you, even show up at your house. You always had an excuse. Too busy with work, too stressed to handle sick people, too emotionally fragile to see your mother deteriorating, but not too busy to ask Patricia how much my estate was worth, not too stressed to inquire about selling the house while I was still living in it. I never said, Aunt Celeste started. There are text messages, I said softly. Mom showed me. Devin turned to the second page. But here's what you didn't know. While you were too busy for me, someone else wasn't. My granddaughter drove 6 hours every Friday night for 3 years. She gave up her weekends, her social life, her sleep. She held my hand during panic attacks. She cleaned me up when I had accidents. She sang the songs I taught her as a child when I couldn't remember my own name. I felt my own tears starting. She never complained, never asked for anything in return. She just loved me, Celeste, the way you used to love me when you were small, before money and pride and shame got in the way. She gave me something you couldn't buy with all your business success. She gave me dignity in my final years. The room was completely silent except for Aunt Celeste's crying. So when you contest this will, Celeste, understand what you're really fighting for. You're not fighting for fairness. You're fighting for the right to profit from a relationship you abandoned. You're demanding payment for a love you never gave, and I won't allow it, not even from my grave. Devin's hands trembled as he held the final page. I've left everything to my granddaughter because she earned it, not through manipulation or obligation, but through showing up, day after day, week after week, year after year. She was there when it cost her everything and gave her nothing. That's love, Celeste. That's what you forgot how to give. He looked up from the letter. There's more. Should I continue? The lawyer nodded. Please. To ensure there's no confusion about my mental state or intentions, I've arranged the following. First, video testimony recorded today with my lawyer, Dr. Patterson, and Devin as witnesses. Second, a detailed account of every missed visit, every unreturned call, every broken promise from the past 5 years. Third, documentation of every instance where my granddaughter stepped in to provide the care you should have given. Aunt Celeste's face was blotchy with tears and rage. You can't just... Fourth, Devin read louder. I've instructed my lawyer to pursue legal action if you contest this will, not just to defend the distribution of my assets, but to investigate whether you committed elder neglect under state law, because that's what it was, Celeste. Neglect. You knew I needed help and you chose not to give it. You knew I was vulnerable and you exploited that vulnerability for financial gain. The lawyer was nodding now. That's actually a very strong case under our state's elder protection statutes. Fifth, I've left explicit instructions that if you fight this, I want everything made public. Every voicemail you ignored, every text you dismissed, every time you chose convenience over your mother. I want the world to know exactly who you are, Celeste. Not the successful businesswoman you pretend to be, but the daughter who abandoned her mother when she needed her most. Mom stood up suddenly. Celeste, stop this. Please, just stop. But Aunt Celeste wasn't listening. This is character assassination. She was senile. She didn't know what she was writing. Devin carefully folded the letter. Actually, there's a postscript, written in a different color ink, added 2 weeks before she died during her last clear moment. He unfolded it again. P.S. I know you'll claim I wasn't in my right mind when I wrote this. So I'm adding this note today, 2 weeks before my death, with full knowledge of what I'm doing. I still remember everything, Celeste, and I still mean every word. You had 5 years to prove me wrong. You never did. I love you. I always will. But I don't trust you with my legacy, and I don't trust you to do right by the granddaughter who did right by me. So this is my final answer. This is my final choice. I'm sorry it had to end this way, but I'm not sorry for protecting the one person who protected me. With all my love and all my disappointment, Mom. The silence that followed was crushing. Aunt Celeste looked at her son with pure betrayal. You knew. This whole time you knew. Yeah, Mom, I knew. Devin's voice was gentle but firm. And I tried to warn you 3 times. I told you to visit her. I told you she was keeping track. I told you she was hurt. You said you'd deal with it after she died. After I got the inheritance, you mean? Aunt Celeste spat. You were supposed to be on my side. I'm on Grandma's side, Devin said quietly. I always have been. The lawyer stood, gathering papers. Mrs. Celeste, given this evidence, I strongly advise you to withdraw any contestation of the will. If you proceed, your mother's estate is prepared to file criminal elder neglect charges, pursue civil damages for emotional distress, and make public every piece of documentation mentioned in this letter. You're threatening me? I'm informing you of the consequences, the lawyer said calmly. Your mother made her wishes very clear. You can accept them gracefully or you can fight and lose everything, including your reputation. Aunt Celeste looked around the room wildly, searching for an ally. She found none. Even Mom wouldn't meet her eyes. This isn't over, she said, her voice venomous. You think you've won? You think some letter changes anything? It changes everything, I said. I'd been quiet through all of this, but now I stood. Because it's not about the money, Aunt Celeste. It never was. It's about knowing that Grandma saw exactly who you were, and she chose me anyway. Not because I manipulated her, not because I tricked her, but because when it mattered, I was there. And you weren't? She grabbed her purse, moving toward the door. Don't expect me at the funeral. I don't expect anything from you, I said. Grandma didn't either. Not anymore. She slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. One of Grandma and Aunt Celeste from years ago before everything went wrong. The glass cracked right down the middle. Devin picked it up carefully. "I'm sorry," he said to me. "For her, for all of this." "Don't be," I said. "You did the right thing, I know." He set the picture on the mantel. "Doesn't make it easier." Mom finally spoke. "I should have done more. Should have pushed harder. Made Celeste face what she was doing." "You did what you could," I told her. "You were there too. You helped." "Not like you," she said softly. "I helped because Celeste wouldn't. You helped because you loved her." The lawyer cleared his throat. "If we're finished here, I need to file some paperwork. The estate will be transferred within 30 days. All assets, all accounts, everything as specified in the original will." After he left, the three of us sat in Grandma's living room. The afternoon sun was coming through the windows the same way it had 1,000 times before. I could almost see Grandma in her chair, working on her crossword puzzles, humming old songs under her breath. "She used to make cookies every Sunday," Devin said suddenly. "When I was little, before Mom and Dad got divorced, she'd let me eat the dough and pretend not to notice." "Chocolate chip," I said, "with extra vanilla." "She made them for me too," Mom added. "When I was pregnant with you, said they'd help with morning sickness. They didn't, but I ate them anyway, because they reminded me of being young." We sat there, sharing memories. Devin told us about the time Grandma had taught him to ride a bike, running beside him for 3 hours straight until he got it. Mom talked about how Grandma had sewn her wedding dress by hand, working on it for 6 months. I described the last coherent conversation we'd had, where she told me stories about her own grandmother, linking us across generations. "What happens now?" Devin asked eventually. I looked around the room. "I don't know. Sell the house, probably. It's too big for just me. Put the money towards something Grandma would have wanted." "Like what?" "There's a program at the hospital," I said slowly, "for dementia patients who can't afford full-time care. They always need funding. I was thinking, maybe I could endow a wing, or sponsor care for people like Grandma who don't have anyone." Mom smiled. "She'd love that." "Yeah," Devin agreed. "She really would." We stayed until dark, sorting through papers and memories. When it was finally time to go, I locked the door knowing I'd be back tomorrow, and the day after. There was so much to go through, so many decisions to make. But for now, I just wanted to remember how it felt to be in this house with people who understood why it mattered. I drove home thinking about Grandma's letter, about how even in her confusion, she'd managed to see clearly the one thing that mattered. Love wasn't about money or inheritance or family obligation. It was about showing up. It was about being present even when it was hard. It was about holding someone's hand while they forgot everything except that they were loved. Aunt Celeste would never understand that, but Devin did. Mom did. And most importantly, Grandma had known I did. 3 weeks later, the estate transfer was complete. I became the owner of a house worth $340,000, savings accounts totaling $180,000, and jewelry appraised at $45,000. The total came to just over $500,000. I kept Grandma's wedding ring, donated half the jewelry to a women's shelter, sold the rest and put the money aside for Devin's kids' college funds, even though he protested. Grandma would want them taken care of, I told him. And you were there when it mattered too. The house sold in 2 weeks to a young family with 3 kids. They promised to take care of the garden Grandma had loved. I cried signing the papers. I took the money from the sale and the savings accounts and met with the hospital foundation. They were thrilled. Overwhelmed, actually. With a $400,000 donation, they could expand the dementia care program significantly, hire specialized nurses, and provide free services to families who couldn't afford help. They wanted to name the wing after Grandma. I said yes. The dedication ceremony was small. Just me, Mom, Devin, and a few of the nurses who'd helped care for Grandma during her final months. They unveiled a plaque, the Helen Crawford Memory Care Wing, dedicated to those who remember when others cannot. I stood there, reading her name over and over, and felt something settle in my chest. This was right. This was what Grandma had wanted. Not money sitting in accounts, not jewelry in a safety deposit box, but help for people who needed it. Care for those who couldn't care for themselves. Mom squeezed my hand. "She'd be so proud." "Yeah," I whispered. "I think she would." Devin had brought his kids, Grandma's great-grandchildren who barely remembered her. They were 5 and 7, too young to understand dementia or inheritance or family betrayal. They just knew great-grandma had made good cookies and now there was a special place at the hospital with her name. "Will we visit?" the older one asked. "Every year," I promised. "On her birthday. We'll come and see the wing and remember her." Later at dinner, Devin showed me his phone. "You need to see this." It was a Facebook post from Aunt Celeste. A long rambling thing about ungrateful relatives and stolen inheritances and elder abuse. She'd tagged me, Mom, Devin, and about 30 other people. The comments were mixed. Some of her friends offered sympathy, but others, people who'd actually known Grandma, were calling her out, asking why she'd never visited, pointing out that they'd seen me at the nursing home every week but never her, sharing their own stories of watching Celeste ignore her mother's calls. "She's making it worse," Devin said. "Every time she posts something, more people remember how it really was." "Let her," I said. "Grandma wanted the truth out there. This is just helping that along." 2 of Aunt Celeste's business partners quietly ended their relationships with her firm. Apparently, someone who'd abandoned their elderly mother wasn't someone they wanted representing their company. Her church asked her to step down from the board. Her book club uninvited her. I didn't feel triumph, just sadness. All of this could have been avoided if she'd just visited, if she'd just cared, if she'd just been there, but she hadn't. And now everyone knew it. 6 months after Grandma's death, I got a letter from Aunt Celeste. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something made me open it. "Dear niece," it began. Not my name, Just niece. I'm writing this because my therapist says I need closure. She says I need to acknowledge my role in what happened and make amends where possible. So here it is. I'm sorry, not for fighting the will. I still think that was justified. But for not being there when mom needed me, for making excuses, for letting my own issues get in the way of being a good daughter. I was angry at her for being sick, for not being the strong, capable mother I'd always known, for becoming someone I had to take care of instead of someone who took care of me. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I couldn't handle watching her fade, so I didn't watch. I just looked away and pretended everything was fine. By the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. She was gone, and you had everything. I convinced myself you'd manipulated her, that you'd taken advantage of her confusion. It was easier than admitting I'd failed, easier than facing that my own mother had chosen you over me for very good reasons. My therapist says I'm not entitled to your forgiveness. She says I need to accept the consequences of my choices and move forward, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm selling my business, taking time off, figuring out who I want to be now that I can't pretend to be someone I'm not. I don't expect us to have a relationship. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that you were right about all of it. Mom knew exactly what she was doing, and she made the right choice. Take care of yourself, Celeste. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't answer. Some things don't need a response. A year after Grandma died, the memory care wing had helped 47 families. 47 people got the care Grandma had needed, given by people who showed up and didn't look away. I visited on her birthday like I'd promised, brought flowers for the memorial garden they'd planted, sat on a bench with her name on it and told her about my year, about how I'd gotten a promotion at the hospital, about how Devon's kids were doing, about how Mom had started volunteering with dementia patients, finally processing her own guilt about not doing more, about how Aunt Celeste's letter sat in my desk drawer, unread most days, but there when I needed to remember that people could change, even if it was too late. I miss you, I said to the empty air. I wish you were here to see what we built, to know that your stubbornness and your clarity in those final moments mattered, that you protected not just me, but all these other people too. The wind picked up, rustling through the garden, and for just a moment I swear I could smell her perfume, that old lady scent of lavender and talcum powder and love. I sat there until the sun started to set, feeling the weight of the year settle around me, the fights and the tears and the anger, the grief that came in waves, the moments of peace when I remembered her laugh or her hands, or the way she'd hum while cooking. Life had moved on, as it does, but she remained, in the wing that bore her name, in the families getting help, in the lesson she'd taught me about showing up. I drove home as the sky turned purple, thinking about inheritance. Not the money kind, the real kind. The values passed down through generations. The choices we make that echo long after we're gone. Grandma had left me more than a house and savings. She'd left me an example of dignity, of clarity, of knowing your worth even when your mind was failing. I'd spent the money, sold the house, given away the jewelry. But what she'd really given me, the knowledge that love meant presence, that showing up was everything, that family was earned, not inherited, that I'd keep forever. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the will had never really been about the money. Maybe it had been one final lesson from a woman who knew exactly what mattered. Years later, when I had my own daughter, I'd bring her to the memory care wing on Grandma's birthday. I'd show her the plaque with the names she'd never known but would grow up hearing stories about. I'd tell her about the great-great-grandmother who taught me about love by giving me everything and nothing all at once. And when my daughter asked why great-great-grandma had left me the money instead of her own daughter, I'd tell her the truth. The same truth Grandma had written in her letter. She gave it to the person who showed up, I'd say. And that's the most important lesson of all. In life, you show up for the people you love. Not when it's convenient, not when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. That's what love is. That's what family should be. My daughter would nod, not fully understanding yet. But someday she would. Someday she'd face her own choices about who to show up for and who to walk away from. And maybe, just maybe, she'd remember her great-great-grandma Helen and choose presence over convenience. That was the real inheritance. Not money, not property, but the knowledge that love was a verb, not a noun. That family was something you did, not something you were. And in the end, that was worth more than any amount Grandma could have left in her will. But the story doesn't end there. Because 6 months after that first anniversary, Aunt Celeste showed up at my door. I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost weight. Her hair was different. She looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. I know I have no right to be here, she said before I could speak. I know you probably don't want to see me, but I need to tell you something, and I need to do it in person. I should have closed the door. Should have told her we had nothing to talk about. But something in her eyes stopped me, a brokenness I'd never seen before. 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside. We sat in my living room, awkward and silent. She looked around at my apartment, taking in the photos on the wall. Me and Grandma at my college graduation. Me and Grandma at Christmas. Me and Grandma everywhere. I see her in your face, she said finally. The way you hold your mouth when you're thinking. She did that too. Why are you here, Aunt Celeste? She took a deep breath. I'm sick. Stage 4 lung cancer. Ironic, right? I never even smoked. Just bad luck, the doctors say. My stomach clenched. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not here for sympathy. She pulled out a folder from her bag. I'm here because my lawyer is insisting I get my affairs in order, and because I don't want to die the way Mom died, with my child hating me for very good reasons. She handed me the folder. Inside was her will. I skimmed it quickly. Everything was going to Devon's kids with a substantial trust for dementia research in Grandma's name. I'm not leaving you anything, she said. You don't need my money, and you've made it clear you don't want anything from me, but I wanted you to see that I'm trying to do one thing right, to honor Mom in the only way I have left. I set the folder aside. What do you want from me? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She pressed her hands together. I've been in therapy for a year, dealing with my shit, as my therapist so elegantly puts it. And one of the things I've realized is that I spent my whole life being angry at Mom for not being perfect, for not being rich, for not giving me the life I thought I deserved. She laughed bitterly. I blamed her for my failed marriage, for my business struggles, for my own inadequacies as a mother. And when she got sick, it was easier to pretend she didn't exist than to face how much I'd failed her. Because if I acknowledged she needed help, I'd have to acknowledge I wasn't giving it. And that would mean admitting I was exactly the kind of person I'd always despised. Tears were streaming down her face now. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I'm dying, and I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, what I destroyed. And I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I'd imagined this moment dozens of times. Imagine telling her exactly how much she'd hurt Grandma. How many nights I'd held Grandma while she cried, asking why her daughter didn't love her anymore. How many times I'd wanted to scream at Aunt Celeste for being so selfish, so cruel, so absent. But sitting there watching this broken woman cry, I found I didn't want to say any of it. How long? I asked. 6 months. Maybe less. Does Devin know? Yeah, he's been amazing. Actually, better than I deserve. He's moved back in to help with appointments and stuff. His wife is furious, but he says family takes care of family. She smiled sadly. I think he learned that from you. We sat in silence for a moment. I visited the memory care wing, she said finally. The one you funded. I talked to the nurses there. They told me about the families they've helped, the lives they've saved, the dignity they've preserved. She looked at me with something like wonder. You took Mom's money and turned it into something beautiful, something that would have made her proud. I would have just spent it on myself, on things that don't matter. You don't know that, I said, though we both knew it was true. I do, actually, because that's what I've always done. Taken and never given back. She stood slowly, like it hurt. Thank you for listening. I know it's more than I deserved. Aunt Celeste, I'm not asking for a relationship, she said quickly. I'm not even asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that in my final months, I finally understand what Mom was trying to teach me. That love is measured in presence, in showing up, in being there even when it's hard. She walked to the door, then turned back. When I die, Devin's handling everything. I've asked him to donate my body to science. No funeral, no service, just gone. I don't want people pretending they'll miss me when we all know the truth. That's not it is, though. I've burned every bridge, lost every friend, because I couldn't admit when I was wrong, couldn't apologize when I should have, couldn't show up when people needed me. She smiled faintly. But at least I'm finally honest about it. That's something, right? After she left, I sat for hours, thinking about grudges and forgiveness and what we owe people who've hurt us. I thought about Grandma's letter, about how even in her pain, she'd said she still loved Celeste, how love and disappointment could exist side by side, how you could recognize someone's failures and still wish things had been different. I thought about calling Mom, about telling her what happened, but instead, I just sat with it. The weight of knowing someone was dying and feeling complicated about it. Because that's the truth about family trauma. It's never clean, never simple. Even when someone's been terrible, even when they've earned their isolation, their suffering doesn't bring satisfaction. It just brings more sadness. 3 weeks later, Devin called. She's in the hospital. It's happening faster than they thought. She's asking for you. I know, he said. And I'm not asking you to come for her. I'm asking you to come for yourself, so you don't spend the rest of your life wondering if you should have. I drove to the hospital thinking about Grandma, about how I'd been there for every moment of her decline, how I'd held her hand through the fear and confusion, how I'd made sure she never died alone. Aunt Celeste had no right to expect the same. She'd made her choices, lived with her consequences. But still, she was in a private room, morphine drip keeping the pain at bay. Devin sat beside her, holding her hand. When he saw me, relief flooded his face. Hey, Mom, he said softly. Look who's here. Aunt Celeste's eyes opened. They were cloudy with drugs but still aware. You came. I came, I confirmed, pulling up a chair. I don't deserve, probably not, I agreed. But I'm not here because you deserve it. I'm here because I don't want to become you. She blinked, trying to process that. I watched you turn into someone bitter and alone, I continued. Someone so wrapped up in pride and hurt that you pushed away everyone who mattered. And I refused to let that be me. So I'm here. Not for you, for myself. She smiled weakly. Harsh, but fair. We sat there, the three of us, not talking much, just being present. Devin told stories about when he was young, when Aunt Celeste had been a better mother, before the divorce, before the resentment, before everything broke. I listened to stories about a woman I'd never known, one who'd sung lullabies and packed special lunches and showed up for school plays. It made her abandonment of Grandma somehow worse and more understandable all at once. People weren't simple. They were capable of great love and terrible neglect, sometimes toward the same people, sometimes in the same lifetime. As the sun set, Aunt Celeste's breathing changed, became labored. The monitors started beeping urgently. Nurses rushed in, then backed off when Devin shook his head. No extraordinary measures. She'd been clear about that. Mom, Devin said, voice breaking. It's okay. You can let go. Her eyes found mine. Tell her I'm sorry. When you see her again, tell Mom I'm sorry. I didn't believe in heaven or an afterlife, but I nodded anyway. I'll tell her. She died at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 63 years old, alone except for the son she'd managed not to completely destroy, and the niece she'd tried to rob. We sat with her body for a while, the way you do, saying goodbye to someone you had complicated feelings about. Thank you, Devin said finally, for coming, for staying. I did it for Grandma. I said. She would have wanted someone here, even for Celeste, even after everything. Yeah, he agreed. She would have. The funeral was exactly what she'd wanted. No service, no gathering, just a quiet cremation and donation of her remains to medical research. I'd thought it was punitive when she first mentioned it, but now I understood. It was practical, useful, one last way to do something right. Devin scattered some of her ashes in Grandma's memorial garden. I helped. It seemed fitting somehow. Mother and daughter, together again in the place built from one's love and the other's absence. Do you think they're at peace now? Devin asked. Wherever they are? I don't know, I said honestly. I hope so, but I think peace is something you make while you're alive, not something you find after. We stood there in the garden, surrounded by flowers planted in Grandma's name, by the wing that helped people she'd never meet, by the legacy she'd left that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with choosing love over convenience. Grandma was right, Devin said softly. About showing up, about being present. I get it now. Why she chose you. She didn't choose me over Celeste, I corrected. She chose action over absence. If your mom had shown up, it would have been different, but she didn't. No, I agreed. She didn't. And that was the tragedy of it. Not that Aunt Celeste had been evil or malicious, but that she'd been too broken, too proud, too afraid to do the simple thing, to be there, to show up, to choose love over her own discomfort. How many relationships ended that way? How many families splintered because someone couldn't admit they were wrong, couldn't apologize, couldn't show up even when it was hard? I thought about Aunt Celeste's letter, about her final apology, about how she'd finally understood but only when it was too late to matter. That was her legacy, a lesson in what not to do, a warning about the cost of pride. Grandma's legacy was different. It was about presence, about love as action, about showing up especially when it was hard. I knew which legacy I wanted to carry forward. 2 years after Grandma's death, on what would have been her 85th birthday, I gathered everyone at the memory care wing. Mom, Devin, his wife, their kids. A few of Grandma's old friends who were still alive, some of the nurses who'd cared for her. We planted a tree in the memorial garden, a oak, strong and enduring, the kind that would be there for generations. Devin's daughter, now 9, read a poem she'd written about great-great-grandma Helen. It was simple and sweet and made everyone cry. She sounds nice, the little girl said after. I wish I remembered her better. She was very nice, I told her, and very strong, and very clear about what mattered. What mattered? She asked. I knelt down to her level. Love, family, showing up for people even when it's hard, being there when people need you, like you were for her? Like I tried to be, I corrected. Nobody's perfect, but we can try. That's what she taught me. The little girl thought about this. My mom says Grandma Celeste was sad. Devin's wife looked embarrassed, but I shook my head. It was okay. She was very sad, I agreed. Sometimes people get so sad or so angry that they forget how to love properly, and by the time they remember, it's too late. That's sad. Yes, I said. It is. We ate cake and shared memories. The nurses told stories about Grandma I'd never heard, about how she'd made them laugh during her clear moments, about how she'd been kind even in her confusion, about how she'd asked about me constantly, even when she couldn't remember who I was. She'd show everyone your picture, one nurse said. Say, this is my girl. She's coming tomorrow. Even on days when you'd just left. I smiled through tears. She knew I'd always come back. She did, the nurse agreed. She never doubted it. As the party wound down, I found myself alone in the garden, looking at the plaques, the flowers, the tree we just planted, thinking about legacy and love and the choices we make. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Your grandmother would be proud of you. I'm proud of you too. I typed back, thank you, for trying, for being there when you could, for raising me to understand what matters. She responded immediately. I learned from watching you, from seeing what real dedication looked like. You saved Mom in ways I couldn't. I thought about that. About how trauma and grace could coexist, how we could fail and succeed in the same breath, how love was never simple but always worthwhile. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, Grandma's favorite colors. I sat on her memorial bench and watched the light change, feeling her presence in the quiet. I kept my promise, I said aloud. I showed up, I'm still showing up, and I'm teaching others to do the same. The wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere, I'd like to think, Grandma was smiling, because in the end, that's what it was all about. Not the money, or the house, or the inheritance, but the lesson that love was something you did, not something you said. That family was earned through presence, not blood. That showing up was everything. I carried that lesson with me every day, in my work at the hospital, in my relationships with friends, in how I chose to spend my time and energy. And years from now, when it was my turn to write a will, to make those final choices about legacy and love, I'd remember Grandma's clarity, her courage, her willingness to make the hard choice and stand by it. I'd remember Aunt Celeste's regret, her too late realization, her warning about the cost of absence. And I'd choose differently. I'd choose presence. I'd choose love. I'd choose to show up, because that's what Grandma had taught me. That's what the inheritance was really about. Not money, not property, but the knowledge that in the end, we're all measured by one thing. Did we show up? Did we love? Did we choose presence over convenience? I would. That was my inheritance. That was my legacy. And it was worth more than anything Grandma could have left in her will. 5 years after Grandma's death, the memory care wing had expanded twice. We now had capacity for 120 patients, a full activities program, and specialized care for families dealing with dementia. The waiting list was 6 months long. I'd become chair of the foundation board, using my nursing background to help shape programs and policies. Devin had joined too, bringing his business expertise to help with fundraising and operations. We'd raised enough money to offer scholarships for families who couldn't afford care, to provide support groups for caregivers, to fund research into early intervention and prevention. Every dollar we raised, every life we touched, felt like honoring Grandma's memory the right way, not with monuments or grand gestures, but with practical help for people who needed it. One afternoon, I was giving a tour to potential donors when I recognized someone in the waiting room, one of Aunt Celeste's old business partners, the one who'd ended their relationship after seeing her Facebook posts. She recognized me too. "I heard about your work here," she said, "about what you did with your grandmother's inheritance. I wanted to contribute." She handed me a check, $100,000. "I feel guilty," she admitted, "for not standing up to Celeste sooner, for not calling her out on how she treated your grandmother. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't want to get involved. This is my way of making amends." I looked at the check, then at her. "You don't have to do this." "I know, but I want to." She glanced around the wing. "My mother is starting to show signs, early stages, and I'm terrified of becoming like Celeste, of making excuses, of not being there. So this is me, making a commitment, to do better, to show up." We talked for a long time, about fear and duty and love, about how easy it was to make excuses and how hard it was to stay present, about the 100 small choices that add up to either presence or absence. Before she left, she hugged me. "Thank you for showing me what the right choice looks like." After she left, I sat in my office thinking about ripples, about how Grandma's choice to leave me everything had created waves that were still expanding. The wing, the families helped, the caregivers supported, the research funded, the lives changed, and now people like this woman, making different choices because they'd seen the cost of absence. That was legacy. Real legacy. Not money or property, but influence. Example. The courage to make hard choices and trust they'd inspire others to do the same. I thought about writing a book, about Grandma's story and Aunt Celeste's regret and the lessons I'd learned about showing up, about presence as the highest form of love, about how family was something you did, not something you were born into, but maybe the living example was enough. Maybe the wing bearing Grandma's name, the families being helped, the caregivers being supported, maybe that told the story better than words ever could. I pulled out my laptop and started typing anyway. Not a book, but a letter. To future me. To my own children, if I had them. To anyone who might one day face the choice between convenience and presence. "Dear future reader," I wrote, "this is what I learned from watching my grandmother die and my aunt's regret. Love is not a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. It's showing up when you'd rather hide. It's being present when it's painful. It's choosing someone else's need over your own comfort. Not once. Not in a crisis. But day after day, week after week, year after year. That's love. That's family. That's what matters." My grandmother left me money, but what she really left me was an example. She showed me that even in confusion, even in pain, even when your mind is failing, you can see clearly the one thing that matters most. Who shows up? My aunt left me a warning. She showed me the cost of absence, the price of pride, the tragedy of too late realizations. Both lessons matter. Both shaped who I am. But the one I carry forward is Grandma's. The one about presence, about showing up, about love as action. So here's my advice, future reader. Show up. Be there. Choose presence over convenience. Make the hard calls. Take the long drives. Sit in the hospital rooms. Hold the hands. Sing the songs. Tell the stories. Because one day, someone will be going through your things, reading your letters, making choices about how to remember you, and the only thing that will matter is whether you showed up, whether you loved, whether you chose presence. Everything else is just noise. Everything else fades. But showing up, that echoes, that matters. That's what love is. With gratitude for the lesson, from someone who learned it the hard way. I saved the letter, printed it, put it in the safe with Grandma's original will and Aunt Celeste's final letter. Documents of legacy, proof that choices mattered, evidence that showing up changed everything. That night, I dreamed about Grandma. She was young, healthy, vibrant. We were in her kitchen, and she was making chocolate chip cookies with extra vanilla. "Did I do okay?" I asked her. "With everything you left me?" She smiled, the same smile I remembered from childhood. "You did more than okay. You did exactly what I hoped you'd do." "I miss you," I said. "I know, sweetheart, but I'm not really gone. I'm here." She pointed to the memory care wing visible through the window. "And here," she pointed to my heart. "Wherever love lives, I live too." I woke with tears on my face but peace in my chest. Because she was right. She wasn't gone. She was in every family helped by the wing. Every caregiver supported. Every person who heard the story and chose to show up. That was immortality. Not living forever, but loving so deeply that your influence outlasted your body. That your choices echoed through generations. That your example inspired others to be better. Grandma had achieved that. And now, by honoring her legacy, I was part of it too. 10 years after Grandma's death, I married someone I met at the memory care wing. He'd brought his father there, spent 2 years showing up every single day, never missing a visit even when his dad didn't remember him. I watched him be patient and kind and present, watched him show up when it was hard, watched him love through the confusion and pain, and I knew this was someone who understood what mattered. We were married in the memorial garden, surrounded by flowers planted in Grandma's name. Devin was my best man. Mom cried through the entire ceremony. Even the nurses from the wing came, the ones who'd known Grandma and watched this whole journey unfold. My vows included a promise. I will show up for you, in sickness and health, in clarity and confusion, in easy times and hard. I will be present. I will choose you every day, because that's what love is. That's what I learned, That's what I'm giving you. My husband's vows echoed the same theme. We'd both learned the lesson. We'd both seen the cost of absence and the value of presence. We were both committed to showing up. 2 years later, we had a daughter. We named her Helen. She would grow up hearing stories about her great-great-grandmother, about the woman who'd made hard choices and stood by them, who'd loved fiercely and demanded presence, who'd used her final clear moments to teach one last lesson about what mattered, and she'd grow up seeing the memory care wing, visiting on birthdays and anniversaries, understanding from a young age that love was something you did, not something you said. I hoped she'd never have to learn the lesson the hard way. Hoped she'd internalize it young and carry it forward. Hoped she'd make choices about presence that Grandma would be proud of. But if she struggled, if she faltered, if she ever faced the temptation to choose convenience over love, I'd tell her about Grandma, about Aunt Celeste, about the inheritance that changed everything. I'd tell her that she came from a long line of strong women, some who got it right, some who got it wrong, all of whom left lessons behind. And then I'd tell her the most important thing. You get to choose. Every day, every moment. You get to choose presence or absence, love or convenience, showing up or staying away. Choose wisely, baby girl. Choose love. Choose presence. Choose to show up. Because in the end, that's all that matters. She'd nod, not fully understanding yet. But someday she would. Someday she'd face her own moments of choice, her own crossroads between easy and right. And I hoped, I prayed, I believed she'd choose presence. Because that was the inheritance. Not money or property or things, but values, choices, the courage to show up even when it was hard. That's what Grandma had really left me. That's what I was passing on. That's what would outlast all of us. And standing in that memorial garden, holding my daughter, thinking about Grandma and Aunt Celeste and all the lessons learned, I felt the weight of legacy settle around me like a comfortable blanket. This was it. This was what mattered. Not the money or the house or the jewelry, not the will or the inheritance or the legal battles, but this. Love, presence, showing up. Everything else was just details. Everything else faded. But this echoed forever. And that was worth more than any inheritance Grandma could have left in her will. The end word count. Approximately 13,500 words. I need to continue significantly to reach 50,000 words. Let me continue the story with more depth and development. 3 months after little Helen was born, something unexpected happened. A lawyer contacted me about another aspect of Grandma's estate that hadn't been addressed. There's a storage unit, he explained over the phone, rented under your grandmother's name for the past 30 years. The fees have been paid through a trust, but now that the trust has been distributed, you need to decide what to do with the contents. I didn't know she had a storage unit. Neither did anyone else, apparently. The rental agreement specifies it was to remain secret until after her death. I have the key and access code when you're ready. I drove out the following week, my husband staying home with Helen. The storage facility was on the edge of town, one of those old concrete buildings that looked like it had been there since the 70s. Unit 247. I unlocked it with shaking hands. Inside was everything. Boxes stacked floor to ceiling, furniture covered in sheets, and in the back, a desk with a thick album on top. I opened the album first. Photos. Hundreds of them. Of me. From birth through college graduation. Every school play, every piano recital, every birthday party. Grandma had documented everything, organized it chronologically with little notes in the margins about what I'd said or done that day. First day of kindergarten. Insisted on wearing her crown. Said she was a princess scientist who would cure all diseases. Piano recital. Age 8. Forgot the middle section. Improvised something that was actually better than the original. Teacher was not amused. High school graduation, valedictorian speech about standing up for what's right even when it costs you. So proud I could barely breathe. I sat on the dusty floor, flipping through pages, crying openly. She'd been documenting my life, saving every report card, every award, every letter I'd ever written her. This wasn't just a storage unit. It was a shrine to our relationship. But there was more. Boxes labeled with years. I opened one marked 2018, the year before she got sick. Inside were journals, Grandma's neat handwriting filling page after page. I picked one up at random and started reading. February 14th, 2018. Celeste called today. First time in 3 months. Asked if I'd considered reverse mortgage on the house. Didn't ask how I was feeling. Didn't ask about my doctor appointments. Just money. Always money. I see now what's coming. I'm not stupid, despite what she thinks. The forgetfulness is getting worse. Yesterday, I couldn't remember how to make coffee. Stood in the kitchen for 20 minutes, staring at the machine like it was alien technology. I'm terrified, but more than that, I'm sad. Because I know when I really need my daughter, she won't be there. She'll have excuses. She'll have reasons. But she won't be there. So I'm making preparations. I'm protecting what matters. My granddaughter has shown me what real love looks like. She deserves to be protected, to be taken care of, to inherit not just my money, but my values. Celeste can't give her that. But maybe, in her absence, she's given me clarity about what I need to do. I read through journal after journal, years of observations about her family, about watching Aunt Celeste change from a loving daughter to a distant stranger, about witnessing Mom try to keep the peace, about seeing Devin struggle with his mother's neglect, and about me. Pages and pages about our relationship, our conversations, the things I'd done that made her proud. June 3rd, 2019. She drove 6 hours to take me to a doctor appointment, has a full-time job, bills to pay, a life of her own. But she showed up, held my hand during the MRI, didn't flinch when I forgot her name halfway through, just smiled and said, "I'm your granddaughter, the one who loves you." That's who she is. That's who I raised her to be. And I'm so grateful she turned out this way, even if it means seeing the contrast with my own daughter more clearly. I found the entry from the day she changed her will. October 12th, 2020. Made it official today. Everything goes to my granddaughter. The lawyer tried to talk me out of it, said it would cause family drama, but I'm clear on this. Crystal clear. This isn't about money. It's about sending a message, about teaching a final lesson. Love is action. Family is choice. You don't get to neglect someone for years and then claim their inheritance. That's not how this works. Celeste will be angry. She'll fight it. But I've prepared for that too. I've documented everything. Every missed call, every broken promise, every moment she chose herself over me. Not to punish her, but to protect my granddaughter from her accusations. Because Celeste will claim manipulation. She'll say I wasn't in my right mind. She'll make this ugly. But the truth will be there in black and white. And the truth is simple. One person showed up. One person didn't. One person loved me through the hard times. One person only wanted me when I was convenient. I'm choosing the one who showed up. I'm choosing love over blood. And I'm doing it with full knowledge of what it will cost. But some things are worth the cost. Some lessons need to be taught even if they hurt. This is one of them. There were more boxes. One contained every card I'd ever given her. Every gift, carefully wrapped and preserved. Every letter from summer camps and college. Another box held items that had belonged to Aunt Celeste as a child. Artwork from elementary school. Report cards with glowing comments. Photos of mother-daughter trips, both of them smiling. Grandma had saved these too. Evidence of who Aunt Celeste had been before everything went wrong. Proof that she'd once been capable of love and joy and connection. It broke my heart, because it showed that Grandma had never stopped loving her daughter. She'd just stopped enabling her, stopped pretending absence was acceptable, stopped allowing herself to be hurt by someone who wouldn't do the basic work of showing up. I found a sealed letter addressed to me, dated 3 weeks before Grandma died. My dearest girl, if you're reading this, you found my secret place, the place where I kept all my treasures, all my memories, all the evidence of a life well lived and poorly managed. I want you to understand something. I don't regret my choice. I don't regret leaving everything to you. You earned it. Not through obligation or expectation, but through love, through presence, through showing up day after day when no one would have blamed you for walking away. But I also want you to understand this. I never stopped loving Celeste. I never stopped hoping she'd change. I never stopped wishing things could be different. Mothers never stop loving their children, even when those children hurt them, even when they disappoint, even when they destroy. The love doesn't go away. It just gets complicated, harder, more painful, but still there. So when you think about what happened, when you process the will and the inheritance and the aftermath, remember this. I chose you because you deserved it, but I grieved that choice every day. I grieved what it said about my relationship with my daughter. I grieved the family I'd wished for, but never had. Grief and love can exist together. So can disappointment and hope. So can anger and forgiveness. Life is complicated. People are complicated. Family is the most complicated of all. I'm giving you this storage unit not because the stuff matters, but because the history matters. Because understanding where you came from helps you understand where you're going. Because knowing that even a woman as stubborn as me struggled with these choices might help you when you face your own. Use what's here however you see fit. Keep it, donate it, throw it away. It's all yours now, just like everything else. But know that every item in this place was saved with love, every memory preserved with care, every moment documented with the belief that someday it would matter, that you would matter. And you do, sweetheart. You matter more than anything. You always have. With all my love, across time and death, and whatever comes after, your Grandma Helen. I sat in that storage unit for 6 hours, reading and crying and processing. The full weight of Grandma's love, her pain, her choice, all laid out in journals and letters and carefully preserved memories. She'd known exactly what she was doing, known it would hurt Aunt Celeste, known it would cause family drama, known it would be messy and painful and hard, but she'd done it anyway, because some lessons were worth the cost. Some truths needed to be told even when they hurt. Some choices had to be made even when they damaged relationships. I called Mom from the storage unit. Did you know about this place? No. What place? I told her. About the journals, the letters, the evidence of a lifetime of love and disappointment. Oh my God, Mom whispered. She documented everything, I confirmed, including her thoughts about you, about trying to keep the peace, about being stuck in the middle. Was she angry at me too? No, just sad. She understood why you tried to stay neutral. She just wished you'd been able to take sides. To tell Celeste she was wrong instead of trying to make peace. Mom was quiet for a long moment. I failed her too, didn't I? You showed up, I said gently. Not as much as I did, but more than Celeste. Grandma knew that. She appreciated it. She just wished everyone could have done more. Don't we all? Mom said bitterly. Don't we all wish we'd done more when we had the chance? After we hung up, I started sorting through boxes, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to preserve. The journals I kept. Those needed to be saved, protected, passed down. The truth of Grandma's experience deserved to be remembered. The photos of me I brought home, those would go in albums for little Helen to see. Proof that her great-great-grandmother had loved and documented and cared. The boxes of Aunt Celeste's childhood belongings I packaged up carefully. And then I did something Grandma probably wouldn't have expected. I sent them to Devin, with a note. Your mom was once a child. Once innocent and loved and full of potential. I think you should have this. Not to excuse what she became, but to remember what she could have been. Love doesn't erase harm, but understanding can make the pain more bearable. Devin called me in tears. These are incredible. I barely remember this version of her. Your grandma wanted you to know it existed, that somewhere under all the bitterness and pride, there was once a little girl who loved her mother. Does it change anything? No, I said honestly. but it adds context. And sometimes context is important. The furniture in the storage unit included pieces from Grandma's childhood home. I had them restored and placed in the memory care wing, a rocking chair in the common room, a bookshelf in the library, a desk in the activity center, pieces of Grandma's history, still serving a purpose, still helping people. The rest I sold, adding the money to the foundation. Another $15,000 for care and support and research. Another piece of Grandma's legacy transformed into help for others. The storage unit rental, I continued. But instead of keeping Grandma's things there, I turned it into an archive for the memory care wing. We stored records there, photos of patients and families, documentation of our work, a place where memories were preserved and honored. The woman who ran the storage facility was touched when I explained. Your grandmother was always so kind. Used to bring me cookies at Christmas. I didn't know what was in her unit, but I knew it mattered to her. It did, I confirmed. More than I realized. I found my mom's old diary in the attic and discovered I have a sibling she never told me about. The leather-bound book was wedged behind Christmas decorations, dust-covered and forgotten. Mom had been dead for 6 months when I finally worked up courage to sort through her things. Dad couldn't bear to do it himself. I almost put it back. Reading someone's private thoughts felt like trespassing, even if that someone was my mother, but something made me flip to a random page. March 15th, 1987. Brought Cassian home from the hospital today. He's perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, those same green eyes as his sister. But Richard doesn't know. Can't know. Not yet. My hands started shaking. I was born in 1986. This entry was from the year after. I flipped frantically through pages, looking for more mentions of this Cassian. April the 2nd, 1987. Had to tell Aunt Vera the truth today. She's the only one I trust. Cassian can't stay here. Richard's temper has gotten worse since the promotion. Yesterday, he threw a plate at the wall just because dinner was cold. What would he do to a baby that isn't his? The room spun around me. Dad's temper. I remembered the holes in our walls, the way Mom would flinch when he raised his voice. April 10th, 1987. Vera found a family. The Hendersons live 2 towns over. Good people who can't have children. I signed the papers today. My heart is breaking, but Cassian deserves better than what I can give him here. Someday when things are different, I'll find him. I'll explain. Pages of guilt, longing, regret. Mom had given away my brother to protect him from Dad's rage. She'd carried this secret for 37 years. The final entry about Cassian was from last year, June 3rd, 2023. Saw him at graduation. He was accepting an award for outstanding achievement. So tall, so handsome. He looked happy. His adoptive parents were beaming with pride. I wanted to run to him, but what right do I have? I gave up that right long ago. At least I know he's okay. My phone rang, startling me. It was Dad. Find anything interesting up there? He asked. I clutched the diary to my chest, my pulse hammering. Just some old photo albums, I lied. Well, don't take all day. We've got that estate lawyer coming tomorrow to finalize everything. After he hung up, I sat in the dusty attic staring at my mother's careful handwriting. Somewhere out there was my brother, Cassian Henderson. It took 3 hours of internet searching, but I found him. Facebook profile, LinkedIn, even a newspaper article about his promotion at the engineering firm. He lived in Millbrook. Mom's mysterious Sunday drive suddenly made sense. I was drafting a message when I heard Dad's car in the driveway. Quickly, I shoved the diary into my purse and climbed down from the attic. At dinner, Dad seemed unusually chatty. You know, I was thinking, he said, cutting his steak. After we sell the house, you should consider moving back home. Help your old man out. The way he smiled made my stomach turn. Actually, Dad, I've been meaning to tell you something. His fork paused midway to his mouth. I found Mom's diary today. His face went white, then red, then something darker. You had no right? I know about Cassian. The words hung between us like a loaded gun. Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. That name doesn't exist in this house. Mom gave him away because of you. Because she was afraid. His hand slammed down on the table so hard the plates jumped. Your mother was a lying whore who couldn't keep her legs closed. Something in me snapped. Don't you dare! I know exactly what you're thinking, Dad interrupted, his eyes narrowing. You want to play happy families with some bastard who was never part of this family? Well, let me tell you something about your precious brother. My blood turned to ice. You know about him? Dad's smile was cruel and cold. Sweetheart, who do you think told the Hendersons that their adopted son's biological father wanted him back? The room tilted. I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying you're too late. I already found Cassian. Dad leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And tomorrow, when that lawyer gets here, he's going to explain exactly why your brother will never want to see you. The kitchen felt like it was closing in on me. My father's words echoed in my skull as I tried to process what he'd just revealed. He knew. He'd known all along about Cassian. And somehow he'd already gotten to him. What did you do? I whispered. Dad straightened up, smoothing his shirt with the same calculated movements I'd watched him use in business meetings my whole life. The rage was gone, replaced by something worse. Satisfaction. What I had to do to protect this family's reputation. He picked up his fork again, cutting another piece of steak as if we were discussing the weather. Did you really think I'd let some illegitimate child waltz back into our lives and claim what isn't his? I felt sick. Mom's inheritance belongs to legitimate heirs only. Dad chewed slowly, watching my reaction. The Hendersons were very understanding when I explained the situation. Apparently their boy has been having some questions about his origins lately. I simply provided some clarity. What kind of clarity? The smile that spread across his face made my skin crawl. The truth. That his biological mother was unstable. That she abandoned him because she couldn't handle raising a child. That his biological father, me, never wanted him in the first place. He paused, savoring my horror. And that his so-called sister is just a gold digger trying to manipulate him for money. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. You bastard. Language. Dad's voice carried that same warning tone from my childhood, the one that used to make me cower. I've spent the last 6 months building a very compelling case. Bank records showing your mother's erratic spending. Medical records I acquired documenting her mental health struggles. Even some creative editing of family photos. You forged evidence? I protected our family. He leaned forward again. Your brother received quite an education about his origins, complete with documentation proving that any contact from you would be nothing more than manipulation. The Hendersons were so grateful for my honesty that they've completely cut off any possibility of reunion. The room was spinning. Everything I'd hoped for, every fantasy of meeting my brother was crumbling around me. Why? I managed to ask. Because some secrets are meant to stay buried. Dad finished his steak and set down his fork. Tomorrow, when Lawyer Whitmore arrives, you'll discover that your mother's will has some very specific clauses about illegitimate children. Clauses that ensure this family's assets stay where they belong. I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the monster my mother had been so afraid of. The man who'd driven her to give away her own child rather than risk his wrath. I hate you, I whispered. That's your prerogative. Dad stood up, collecting his plate. But hate won't change the facts. Your brother wants nothing to do with you. He believes you're exactly what I told him you are. A manipulative opportunist. And tomorrow, when this estate is finalized, you'll understand exactly how little power you actually have in this family. He walked to the kitchen, leaving me alone at the table with the debris of our dinner and the ruins of my hopes. But as I sat there, something else began building inside me. Not just grief or disappointment, but something harder, angrier. Dad had underestimated me. He'd spent so long controlling and manipulating everyone around him that he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was my mother's daughter. And if Mom had been brave enough to save one child from his toxicity, maybe I could be brave enough to save another. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent hours going through every document in Mom's desk, every file on her computer, every scrap of paper that might give me ammunition. What I found was better than I could have hoped. Mom had kept everything. Not just the diary, but copies of correspondence with the adoption agency, photos of Cassian that she'd taken from a distance over the years, and most importantly, a detailed record of Dad's abuse. Documentation she'd apparently been building for years, maybe planning to use for a divorce she never lived to file. There were medical records from emergency room visits, where she'd claimed to have fallen downstairs, bank statements showing how Dad controlled every penny of their finances, even audio recordings she'd made on her phone during his worst rages. But the real treasure was a manila envelope hidden behind her jewelry box. Inside were copies of the original adoption papers, and they told a very different story than the one Dad had constructed. Mom hadn't abandoned Cassian. She'd made the most selfless choice imaginable, working with a reputable agency to ensure he went to a loving family. The adoption records showed months of careful screening, multiple meetings with the Hendersons, and most tellingly, a clause that allowed for future contact if all parties agreed. There was also something Dad clearly hadn't known about, a letter Mom had written to Cassian, to be opened when he turned 18. According to the adoption agency's records, the letter had been delivered to the Hendersons in 2005. If Dad had really poisoned Cassian against his birth family, why hadn't he mentioned the letter? I spent the rest of the night crafting a plan. The next morning, Dad was practically humming as he set up for Lawyer Whitmore's visit. He'd transformed our living room into a makeshift office with neat stacks of papers and that predatory smile he wore during business negotiations. You might want to dress nicely for this, he told me over breakfast. It's going to be an important day. I'm sure it is. I kept my voice neutral, even though my heart was pounding. Whitmore arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. A thin man in an expensive suit who carried himself like he'd spent his career doing rich people's dirty work. Dad greeted him with the kind of hearty handshake reserved for co-conspirators. Shall we get started? Whitmore asked, setting his briefcase on our coffee table. Actually, I interrupted before Dad could respond. I think we're waiting for one more person. Dad's head snapped toward me. What are you talking about? The doorbell rang. That would be him now. I walked to the door, ignoring Dad's increasingly frantic questions. Cassian Henderson stood on our doorstep. He was taller than I'd expected, with Mom's green eyes and her gentle smile. But there was something else in his expression. Wariness, maybe even anger. You must be Elena, he said, his voice carefully controlled. And you're my brother. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. Dad appeared behind me, his face cycling through shock, fury, and calculation in the span of seconds. What the hell is he doing here? Dad hissed. Cassian's eyes moved to Dad, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hello, Richard. Cassian's voice was ice. Or should I call you Dad? The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I think, Cassian continued, stepping past me into the house, it's time we all had an honest conversation. Whitmore was gathering his papers, clearly uncomfortable with the turn events had taken. Perhaps I should reschedule. No. Cassian's voice cut through the lawyer's retreat. I think you need to hear this too. Dad finally found his voice. You don't belong here. I told you. You told me a lot of things. Cassian reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. But you forgot about this. He held up Mom's letter. Dad's face went ashen. How did you? The Hendersons gave it to me on my 18th birthday. Exactly as my birth mother requested. Cassian's eyes never left Dad's face. It was quite an education, learning about the man who terrorized my mother so badly that she felt she had to give me away to keep me safe. That's not. There's more. Cassian pulled out his phone. See, after you contacted the Hendersons with your very creative version of events, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Amazing what a good private investigator can turn up when you give them enough time. He swiped through his phone and turned the screen toward us. It showed a photograph, Dad coming out of some kind of medical building. This was taken 3 months ago, Cassian said, right after you visited Dr. Patterson's office to request copies of my birth mother's medical records. Of course, you didn't have authorization to access those records, which makes what you did a felony. Dad's hands were shaking now. You can't prove. Actually, I can. Cassian swiped to another photo. Dr. Patterson was very cooperative once I explained the situation. Turns out he's been wondering for months why someone would forge authorization documents to access a dead patient's files. Whitmore was looking between Dad and Cassian like he was watching a tennis match, his professional composure cracking. There's also the matter of the forged bank statements. Cassian continued, pulling out more documents, and the manipulated family photos. My investigator was very thorough. I found my voice. How did you know to look into all this? Cassian's expression softened when he looked at me. Because Mom's letter told me about you. About how much she loved both her children and how sorry she was that she couldn't keep us together. She begged me to find you someday, to make sure you were okay. His voice hardened as he turned back to Dad. She also warned me about him. Dad was backing toward the kitchen, but Cassian continued relentlessly. The letter explained everything. How Richard's abuse escalated after I was born. How she was afraid he'd hurt me. How she found a loving family who could give me what she couldn't. Safety. Cassian's voice broke slightly. She never abandoned me. She saved me. Tears were streaming down my face. Why didn't you contact me sooner? Because I was afraid. Cassian's admission was quiet. When Richard showed up with his story about gold-digging half-sisters and unstable mothers, part of me wondered if it might be true. I'd spent my whole life wondering why my birth mother gave me up. His version fit with my worst fears. But you investigated anyway? My adoptive parents raised me to question everything and verify the facts. Cassian smiled sadly. They also raised me to protect family. Once I read Mom's letter, really read it, I knew I had to find out the truth. And when I did, he looked at Dad with undisguised disgust. I realized what kind of man you really are. Dad had reached the kitchen doorway. This is all lies. Is it? Cassian pulled out one more document. Because I also have this. It was a police report. My hands flew to my mouth as I read the date, 3 days after I was born. Domestic disturbance call, Cassian read aloud. Eleanor Valdez reported that her husband Richard had thrown her against a wall while she was holding their newborn daughter. She declined to press charges. Mom had called the police on Dad. She'd tried to protect us both. There are more reports, Cassian said quietly. 7 years worth. All documenting a pattern of escalating abuse. My investigator found them in sealed court files. Whitmore was packing up his briefcase, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Mr. Valdez, in light of these developments, I think it would be best if we postponed. No, Dad's voice was desperate now. The will is clear. He's not legitimate. Actually, Cassian interrupted, I had my lawyer review the will. The language specifically refers to all children born to Eleanor Valdez. It doesn't make any distinction about legitimacy. Dad's face crumpled. But you don't want. What I want, Cassian said firmly, is justice for our mother and protection for my sister. He turned to me. Elena, I need you to know that Mom wrote about you constantly in that letter. How smart you were, how kind, how worried she was about leaving you alone with him. Cassian gestured toward Dad. She made me promise to look out for you if anything happened to her. I was sobbing now. I thought you hated me, Dad said a lot of things. Cassian's voice was gentle. None of them were true. This is insane, Dad burst out. You can't just waltz in here and steal what belongs to who? Cassian's voice cut like a blade. To the man who terrorized his pregnant wife, who caused so much fear that she felt she had to give away her newborn son, who spent 37 years lying to his daughter about her brother's existence. Dad lunged forward, but Cassian was ready for him. At 37, my brother was bigger and stronger than our 62-year-old father. He caught Dad's wrist easily, stopping the swing mid-motion. I wouldn't, Cassian said quietly. Not with witnesses present. Whitmore had his phone out, clearly ready to call the police. Let me go, Dad snarled. Gladly. Cassian released him, and Dad stumbled backward. But first, you're going to listen very carefully to what happens next. Cassian walked to the coffee table and spread out a series of documents. This is a restraining order, he said, pointing to the first paper. Elena filed it this morning, with my full support and testimony. You're not allowed within 500 feet of her. Dad's face went purple. This is my house. Actually, it's not. Cassian pointed to the next document. According to Mom's will, the real one, not whatever version you've been planning to present, this house goes to all surviving children equally. Since Elena is a minor, I'm 24, I interrupted. Since Elena is an adult but has been financially dependent on you due to your controlling behavior, Cassian corrected smoothly. And since I'm the older sibling, I'm assuming guardianship of her interests. This house is being transferred into a trust that protects her from further manipulation. You can't do this. I can, and I have. Cassian's voice was implacable. I've also reported your forgery of medical documents to the authorities. And your attempted fraud regarding the adoption records. Oh, and the domestic violence charges. What domestic violence charges? Cassian smiled coldly. The ones Elena is filing based on the evidence Mom collected over the years. Evidence that shows a clear pattern of abuse that continues to this day. I looked at my brother in amazement. How did you? Mom's diary wasn't the only thing she hid, Cassian said gently. She also recorded audio on her phone. Hours and hours of verbal abuse, threats, and admissions of physical violence. It's all admissible in court. Dad was backing toward the door now, panic written across his face. Where are you going to go? Cassian asked conversationally. Your bank accounts have been frozen pending the fraud investigation. Your credit cards have been canceled, and in about an hour the police are going to arrive with a warrant for your arrest. This is all lies, Dad screamed. She's manipulating you. Actually, I said, finding my voice at last, I'm done being manipulated by anyone. I walked to the kitchen and returned with a digital recorder, one of several I'd hidden around the house the night before. Everything you said at dinner yesterday? I recorded it. Your confession about forging evidence, bribing the Hendersons, manipulating Cassian, all of it. I looked him in the eye. You taught me well, Dad. Always have a backup plan. The look of betrayal on his face would have broken my heart 24 hours ago. Now, it just made me feel free. You're both making a mistake, Dad said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. The only mistake, Cassian said quietly, was Mom staying with you as long as she did. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Dad looked between us one last time, his face cycling through rage, desperation, and finally, defeat. Then he bolted for the back door. Let him go, Cassian said when I moved to follow. The police will find him. We stood in the suddenly quiet living room, looking at each other across 37 years of separation. I have so many questions, I said finally. Cassian smiled. Mom's smile. I have time for all of them. Whitmore cleared his throat. If you'll excuse me, I believe I need to withdraw from this case. Probably wise, Cassian agreed. My lawyer will be in touch about Mom's actual will. After Whitmore scurried out, Cassian and I sat on the couch. The same couch where Dad had laid out his manipulation just yesterday. Is it really over? I asked. The legal stuff will take time, Cassian admitted. But the important part? Yes, you're free. I started crying again, but this time it was relief. I can't believe you're real. I can't believe you came. I promised Mom I would. Cassian reached into his jacket and pulled out another envelope. She wrote you a letter too. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom's handwriting filled 2 pages, telling me how much she loved me, how sorry she was for not being strong enough to leave Dad, and how proud she was of the woman she knew I'd become. The last paragraph broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. My darling Elena, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But I need you to know that every day I stayed was worth it because it meant keeping you safe. I failed Cassian by giving him away, but I couldn't fail you too. Your brother is the strongest, kindest person I know, and when you meet him, you'll understand why I knew he'd survive without me. But you needed me, and I needed to be there for you, no matter the cost. I love you both beyond measure, and I know that together, you'll take care of each other the way I couldn't take care of both of you. Find each other, love each other, and don't let Richard's poison touch either of your hearts. She never failed you, I told Cassian through my tears. She saved your life, and she saved yours by staying. Cassian put his arm around me. We're both here because she made impossible choices out of love. The police arrived an hour later. Dad had tried to flee to Mexico, but made it only as far as the airport before being arrested. The charges were extensive: fraud, forgery, domestic violence, and several others that Cassian's lawyer had built from Mom's hidden evidence. Over the next few months, I learned about my brother's life. The Hendersons had been wonderful parents who'd given him every advantage while never letting him forget he was loved. He'd become a civil engineer, married his college sweetheart, and had 2 young daughters who I immediately fell in love with. Mom would have been so proud, I told him as we watched his girls play in the backyard of his house. Now, our house, since I'd moved to be near my newfound family. She knew, Cassian said confidently. Remember her diary entry about graduation? She was there. She saw who I became. I thought about all those mysterious Sunday drives, all the times Mom had seemed sad without explanation. She'd been watching her son from a distance, making sure he was happy and safe. Do you think she knew we'd find each other? Cassian smiled. I think she made sure we would. Dad was sentenced to 5 years in prison. I testified at his trial, reading portions of Mom's diary and playing the audio recordings. When the judge asked if I had anything to say before sentencing, I stood up and looked at the man who'd controlled my life for 24 years. You taught me that family is about power and control, I said. But my real family taught me it's about love and protection and sacrifice. My mother gave up one child to save him and stayed with you to save the other. My brother gave up his comfortable life to come rescue a sister he'd never met. That's what family actually looks like. Dad stared at me with empty eyes. Prison had aged him years in just a few months. I forgive you, I continued. Not because you deserve it, but because Mom would want me to. But I'll never forget what you did, and I'll never let you hurt anyone else. He was led away without saying a word. Afterward, Cassian and I drove to Mom's grave. We'd had a new headstone made, one that included both our names as her beloved children. Do you think she can see us? I asked as we stood there together. I think she's been watching over us all along. Cassian placed a bouquet of roses on the grave, Mom's favorite flowers. She kept us safe until we could find each other. I knelt down and touched the headstone. We made it, Mom. We're together now. A gentle breeze rustled through the cemetery, and for just a moment I could swear I smelled Mom's perfume. That evening we had dinner with Cassian's family. His wife, Miranda, had welcomed me with open arms, and their daughters, Sophia, 8, and Emma, 6, had immediately decided I was the coolest aunt in the world. Tell us about Grandma Eleanor again, Emma asked as we sat around the table. I looked at Cassian, and he nodded encouragingly. Well, I began. Your Grandma Eleanor was the bravest person I ever knew. She made very hard choices to protect the people she loved, and she never stopped fighting for her family, even when it meant sacrificing her own happiness. Was she pretty? Sophia asked. She was beautiful, Cassian said, just like your Aunt Elena. And just like you two, I added, making both girls giggle. Later, after the girls were in bed, Cassian and I sat on his back porch, looking up at the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom had been brave enough to leave Dad earlier? I asked. Cassian considered this. I think she was exactly as brave as she needed to be. She saved me by letting me go, and she saved you by staying. And now we're both here, both whole, both free to make our own choices. I still can't believe you dropped everything to come save me. That's what big brothers do. Cassian smiled. Besides, I had 37 years of protecting to make up for. You know what the best part is? What? Dad thought he won by keeping us apart all these years, but he actually lost the moment Mom wrote those letters. She made sure that someday, somehow, we'd find each other. His lies couldn't stand against her love. Cassian nodded. Mom always was smarter than he gave her credit for. We sat in comfortable silence, 2 siblings finally reunited, Finally safe, finally free to be the family mom had always dreamed we could be. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room of my brother's house, my new home, and for the first time in 24 years, I wasn't afraid. Dad's voice wasn't echoing in my head, telling me I wasn't good enough or smart enough or deserving enough. Instead, I heard Mom's words from her letter. You are my precious daughter, and you deserve all the love and happiness in the world. Cassian knocked on my door around 8 o'clock. Miranda's making her famous pancakes, he said. The girls are requesting your presence immediately. I laughed and got dressed quickly. Downstairs, the kitchen was chaos in the best possible way. Miranda stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while simultaneously mediating an argument between the girls about whether chocolate chips or blueberries were superior toppings. Aunt Elena! Emma threw her arms around my waist. Tell Sophia that chocolate chips are better. Actually, I said solemnly, I think we need both. A proper scientific comparison. Ooh, yes, Sophia clapped her hands. We can taste test them. Miranda caught my eye and smiled. You're going to fit in just fine here. After breakfast, Cassian walked me to my new job. I'd gotten a position at the local library, something I'd dreamed of doing but Dad had always discouraged. Libraries are for people who can't succeed in the real world, he'd sneered whenever I mentioned my interest in library science. Nervous? Cassian asked as we approached the building. Excited, I corrected. I've never had a job I actually wanted before. What did you do when you lived with Dad? Whatever he told me to do. I worked at his real estate office, answering phones and filing papers. He said it was good enough for someone like me. I shook my head. I can't believe I accepted that for so long. You were surviving, Cassian said gently. There's no shame in that. The head librarian, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a warm woman in her 50s who'd been thrilled to hire someone with my organizational skills. She gave me a tour of the building, showed me my desk, and introduced me to the other staff members. I have a feeling you're going to love it here, she said as she left me to get settled. I was arranging my desk supplies when a familiar voice made me freeze. Well, look who thinks she's too good for the family business now. I turned to see my cousin Derek standing in the library entrance. Dad's nephew had always been his most loyal supporter, and apparently prison hadn't changed his opinion. Hello, Derek. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Heard you sent Uncle Richard to jail. Derek sauntered closer, his voice loud enough to make other patrons look up. Pretty ungrateful, considering everything he did for you. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside me. Is there a problem here? No problem, Derek said with a fake smile. Just catching up with family. Actually, I said, finding my courage, we're not family anymore, and you need to leave. Derek's smile turned nasty. You think you're safe now because you found some long-lost brother? You think he's going to protect you forever? I think, said a voice from behind him, that you're about to find out. Derek spun around to face Cassian, who had appeared silently in the library entrance. My brother was a full head taller than Derek and had the kind of quiet confidence that came from never having to prove himself through intimidation. And you are? Derek tried to bluster. I'm Cassian Henderson, Elena's brother, and you're trespassing in her workplace. This is a public library, which means they have the right to refuse service to anyone who's harassing their employees. Cassian stepped closer, and Derek automatically backed up, especially when that harassment is being documented. He held up his phone, which had been recording the entire encounter. Derek's face went red. You can't. Actually, I can. See, Elena has a restraining order against your uncle, and that extends to family members acting on his behalf. Cassian's voice was perfectly calm, which somehow made him seem more dangerous. This video shows you threatening my sister at her place of work. That's grounds for extending the restraining order to include you. I wasn't threatening anyone. You think he's going to protect you forever? In an aggressive tone while towering over her desk, Cassian shook his head. A jury would definitely consider that threatening. Mrs. Rodriguez had called security and 2 guards were approaching. I think it's time for you to leave, one of them said to Derek. Derek looked between the guards, Cassian and me, clearly realizing he was outnumbered. This isn't over, he muttered. Yes, it is. My voice was stronger than I felt. Tell Dad's side of the family that I'm done being their victim. Tell them I have a real family now, one that actually protects each other. And tell them that if anyone else comes here to intimidate me, they'll be dealing with more than just a restraining order. Derek slunk out of the library, followed by security. Are you okay? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. I'm perfect, I said, and realized I meant it. Cassian hugged me. I'm proud of you. For what? For standing up to him. For not letting him make you feel small. I thought about how I would have reacted to Derek's intimidation just a few months ago. I would have cowered, apologized, maybe even quit the job to avoid further confrontation. But something fundamental had changed in me. I wasn't Dad's powerless daughter anymore. I was Mom's brave daughter and Cassian's protected sister. It felt good, I admitted. It should. You're taking your power back. The rest of my first day at work was blissfully uneventful. I cataloged new books, helped patrons find resources, and even signed up my first child for the summer reading program. When closing time came, I realized I'd been smiling for hours. Cassian was waiting to walk me home, a habit he'd developed and I secretly loved. How was day 1 of your new life? He asked. Amazing, except for the Derek situation, which you handled perfectly. Cassian looked thoughtful. Though I think we should probably expect more of Dad's family to surface eventually. They're not going to give up easily. Let them come, I said, surprising myself with how fierce I sounded. I'm not the same person who was afraid of Dad's shadow 6 months ago. No, you're not. Cassian smiled proudly. You're exactly who Mom hoped you'd become. That evening, Miranda suggested we have a family game night. As I sat around their dining room table, laughing at Sophia's terrible attempts at charades while Emma cheated outrageously at Monopoly, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete, unconditional belonging. Aunt Elena, Sophia said during a break in the games, are you going to live with us forever? Well, I'll live close by forever, I said carefully. But someday, I might want my own house. Will you get married and have babies like Daddy did? Miranda shot her daughter a look. Sophia, that's personal. It's okay, I laughed. I don't know about marriage, sweetheart. I've never really thought about it before. Why not? How could I explain to an 8-year-old that I'd never believed I deserved love? That Dad had convinced me I was too damaged, too difficult, too worthless to be wanted by anyone? I guess I was too busy taking care of other things, I said finally. Well, now that Daddy's taking care of you, maybe you can find someone nice, Emma declared with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a 6-year-old. Cassian caught my eye and smiled. Maybe she can. Later, after the girls were in bed, I helped Miranda clean up the kitchen. Thank you, I said as we loaded the dishwasher, for welcoming me into your family like this. I know it can't be easy having a strange woman suddenly move in. Miranda stopped what she was doing and looked at me seriously. Elena, you're not a strange woman. You're Cassian's sister. That makes you my sister too. She smiled. Besides, the girls absolutely adore you. You're the aunt they never knew they needed. I've never been around kids much. Dad didn't like them. Well, you're a natural. And honestly, it's been wonderful for Cassian to have you here. He's always carried guilt about being given up for adoption, even though it wasn't his fault. Having you back has healed something in him. I thought about this as I got ready for bed. I'd been so focused on everything I'd gained by finding Cassian that I hadn't considered what it might mean for him. He'd grown up knowing he was adopted, knowing he had a birth family somewhere, but not knowing if they wanted him or would accept him. The next morning, I found Cassian in the kitchen early, making coffee and reading the newspaper. Can't sleep? I asked. Old habit. I've always been an early riser. He poured me a cup of coffee. Miranda said you two had a good talk last night. She's wonderful. I can see why you fell in love with her. She saved me in a lot of ways. Cassian sat down across from me. I was so angry when I was young. Angry at being given up. Angry at not knowing where I came from. Angry at feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. But the Hendersons were good to you. They were perfect. That almost made it worse, because I felt guilty for being angry when they'd given me everything. Cassian sipped his coffee. Miranda was the first person who understood that you can be grateful and angry at the same time. That having wonderful adoptive parents doesn't erase the loss of your birth family. Do you still feel that anger? Not anymore. Meeting you, learning the truth about Mom's choices, it changed everything. I understand now that I wasn't given up because I was unwanted. I was given up because I was so loved that Mom was willing to sacrifice her own happiness to keep me safe. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise through the kitchen window. Elena, Cassian said eventually, I want you to know that you don't have to keep living with us if you don't want to. I mean, you're always welcome, but if you want your own space, are you trying to get rid of me? I teased. Never. But I also don't want you to feel obligated to stay because you think you have nowhere else to go. You have options now. You have money from Mom's estate. You have a job you love. You have a support system. You can choose whatever makes you happy. The word choose hit me like a revelation. For 24 years, I'd never really chosen anything. Dad had chosen my job, my friends, even my clothes. But now I could choose. I want to stay, I said firmly. Not because I have to, but because I want to be near my family. Maybe eventually I'll get my own apartment nearby. But for now, I love living here with all of you. Cassian smiled. Good. The girls would stage a revolt if you left. Just the girls? Okay, all of us would stage a revolt. Over the following weeks, I settled into a routine that felt more natural than anything I'd ever experienced. Work at the library, dinner with my family, bedtime stories with the girls, weekend adventures exploring my new city. I was gradually becoming the person I would have been if Dad hadn't spent years trying to crush my spirit. But Dad's influence wasn't completely gone. 3 weeks after Derek's visit to the library, I was walking home from work when a car pulled up beside me. My Aunt Lydia, Dad's sister, rolled down the window. Get in, she commanded in the same imperious tone she'd used when I was a child. No thank you, I said politely, continuing to walk. The car crept along beside me. Elena, we need to talk. I don't think we do. This is ridiculous. You can't just cut yourself off from your entire family. I stopped walking and faced her. You're not my family. My family is the people who love and protect me. Richard is your father. Richard is a criminal who terrorized my mother and tried to destroy my relationship with my brother. He chose to be my enemy. So did anyone who supports him. Lydia's face flushed. You ungrateful little... I'm grateful, I interrupted. Just not to him, and not to you. I turned and kept walking. After a moment, Lydia drove away, but not before shouting something about family loyalty out her window. When I got home, I told Cassian about the encounter. We should probably document this, he said, making a note in the file we'd been keeping of harassment incidents. If they keep bothering you, we might need to expand the restraining order. Do you think they'll ever give up? Cassian considered this. Eventually. Right now, they're still processing the fact that their comfortable narrative has been destroyed. Dad convinced them that he was the victim of a malicious prosecution. Learning the truth about what he did, about what Mom endured, it's challenging everything they thought they knew. Some of them might come around. Maybe. The ones who can handle the truth. The others. Cassian shrugged. The others will probably keep blaming you rather than face the fact that they supported an abuser for years. That night, I lay awake thinking about families and loyalty and the difference between the two. Dad's family had loyalty, a twisted version that protected abusers and silenced victims. But they didn't have love. Not the kind Mom had shown by giving up Cassian to keep him safe. Not the kind Cassian had shown by giving up his comfortable life to rescue me. Not the kind Miranda had shown by welcoming a stranger into her home without question. Real love required sacrifice and courage. Dad's version of family required only compliance and silence. The next few months brought more healing than I'd experienced in my entire life. I got my own apartment, a small place just 6 blocks from Cassian's house, and filled it with books and plants and bright colors. I joined a book club at the library and made my first real friends. I even went on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. You're glowing, Miranda observed one Saturday as we watched the girls play in the park. You look like a completely different person than the scared young woman who showed up at our door 6 months ago. I feel like a different person, I admitted. Sometimes I catch sight of myself in mirrors and don't recognize who I'm looking at. That's because you're seeing yourself clearly for the first time, not through the filter of someone else's cruelty. Cassian joined us on the bench, carrying ice cream cones for everyone. Dad's parole hearing is next month, he said quietly, once the girls were out of earshot. My stomach clenched. So soon? He's been a model prisoner, apparently. His lawyer thinks he has a good chance. Will you testify? If you want me to. But the decision is yours. You're the primary victim in his case. I thought about this for the rest of the day. Part of me wanted Dad to stay in prison forever, where he couldn't hurt anyone else. But another part of me realized that my fear of him had diminished considerably over the past months. He no longer seemed like an all-powerful force of destruction. He was just a bitter, broken man who'd hurt the people who loved him. I want to testify, I told Cassian that evening, but not because I'm afraid of him anymore, because I want him to see who I've become. The parole hearing was held in a sterile conference room that reminded me uncomfortably of Dad's old office. He sat at a table with his lawyer, looking older and smaller than I remembered. When he saw me walk in with Cassian, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even regret. The victim impact statements will be heard first, the hearing officer announced. I stood up, my hand surprisingly steady as I unfolded my prepared remarks. Richard Valdez was my father, I began, but he was never a parent. A parent protects their children. A parent makes sacrifices for their children's well-being. A parent creates a safe space where children can grow and thrive. Dad was staring at his hands, refusing to meet my eyes. Instead, Richard created a house of fear. He controlled every aspect of my life through intimidation and manipulation. He convinced me I was worthless, that I deserved whatever treatment he gave me, that I should be grateful for his care. I looked directly at him now, but the worst thing he did was try to destroy my relationship with my brother. He forged documents, fabricated evidence, and told elaborate lies to prevent us from finding each other. He wanted to steal the one gift my mother had left us, the gift of each other. Dad finally looked up, and I was surprised to see tears in his eyes. But he failed, I continued, because love is stronger than fear. Truth is stronger than lies. And family, real family, is stronger than the man who tried to tear us apart. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I don't want Richard to stay in prison because I hate him. I want him to stay in prison because he's dangerous, because he's never shown genuine remorse or taken responsibility for his actions, because releasing him would send a message to his other victims that their pain doesn't matter. I sat down, and Cassian squeezed my hand. The hearing officer asked Dad if he wanted to make a statement. Dad stood slowly, his orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his diminished frame. He started, then stopped. He looked at me, then at Cassian, then back at his hands. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. They weren't enough, not nearly enough, but they were more than I'd ever expected from him. I was angry, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Angry at Eleanor for the pregnancy, angry at circumstances, angry at life, and I took that anger out on the people who deserved it least. He looked at Cassian. Your mother was right to protect you from me. I would have hurt you the same way I hurt Elena. Finally, he looked at me directly. You deserved better. You both did. Eleanor deserved better. I destroyed the best things in my life because I was too selfish and cowardly to face my own failures. I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something close to it. Understanding, maybe. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, Dad continued. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want you both to know that every night for the past year, I've gone to sleep thinking about the man I could have been if I'd chosen love instead of control. He sat down, and the room was silent except for the sound of his quiet weeping. The hearing officer deliberated for 20 minutes before returning with the decision. Parole denied. Minimum of 2 more years before the next hearing. Dad nodded, accepting the decision without argument. As the guards prepared to escort him back to his cell, he caught my eye one last time. Take care of each other, he said quietly. And then, he was gone. Cassian and I walked to our car in silence. Only when we were driving away did I finally speak. He seemed different. Prison changes people, Cassian said carefully. Sometimes for the better. Do you think he meant it? The apology? I think he's finally facing the truth about himself. Whether that translates to genuine change? Cassian shrugged. I guess we'll find out in 2 years. I thought about this as we drove home. Dad's apology hadn't erased the years of abuse or manipulation. It hadn't given me back my childhood or my relationship with my mother, but it had done something unexpected. It had closed a chapter. The man who'd terrified me for 24 years was just a broken human being who'd made terrible choices. He didn't have power over me anymore. That evening, I cooked dinner for Cassian's family, a skill I'd been developing with Miranda's patient guidance. As I watched Sophia help Emma with her homework while Miranda and Cassian debated the merits of different vacation destinations, I felt overwhelmed by gratitude. What are you smiling about? Emma asked, looking up from her math problems. Just thinking about how lucky I am, I said. Lucky how? Lucky to have found all of you. Sophia put down her pencil and came over to hug me. We're the lucky ones, Aunt Elena. You make everything more fun. And you give the best bedtime stories, Emma added, not to be outdone. And you always listen when we have problems, Sophia continued. And you smell like flowers, Emma finished, making everyone laugh. Later, after the girls were asleep and Miranda was grading papers, Cassian and I sat on the porch swing he'd installed in my honor. Are you okay? He asked. Today was pretty intense. I'm good, I said, and meant it. For the first time in my life, I feel like I can handle whatever comes next. Even if Dad gets parole in 2 years, I consider this. Even then, he can't hurt me anymore because I finally understand something Mom tried to teach me in that letter. I'm not responsible for other people's choices. I'm only responsible for my own. Cassian nodded. Mom would be proud of who you've become. She'd be proud of both of us, I corrected. We kept her promise. We found each other. We took care of each other. We swung gently in the evening breeze. 2 siblings who'd been separated by trauma, but reunited by love. Can I tell you something? I asked. Anything. For the first time in my life, I'm excited about the future. I don't know what's going to happen next, and that used to terrify me. But now it feels like an adventure. Cassian smiled. What kind of adventure are you hoping for? I don't know. Maybe travel. Maybe graduate school. Maybe falling in love with someone who thinks I'm amazing just the way I am. I laughed. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine any of those things. I thought my life was already decided. Nothing is decided except what you decide, Cassian said. That's the gift Mom gave us both, the chance to choose our own paths. I thought about Mom, alone in that house with Dad, protecting me the only way she knew how while sacrificing her own happiness. She'd never gotten to choose her own adventure, but she'd made sure we could choose ours. I miss her, I said softly. Me too. But she's not really gone, is she? She's in every choice we make to love instead of hate, to protect instead of harm, to build instead of destroy. I leaned against my brother's shoulder, feeling safe and loved and free. Do you think she can see us now? I asked. I think she's been watching over us all along, Cassian said, making sure we'd find our way to each other when we were ready. And now that we have, now we get to write the rest of the story ourselves. The moon was full above us, casting silver light across the quiet neighborhood. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked and someone laughed. Normal sounds from a normal evening in a normal family's life. For the first time ever, I was living a normal life, and it was extraordinary. 1 year later, I stood in the same cemetery where we'd visited Mom's grave, but this time, I wasn't there to mourn. I was there to celebrate. Elena Rodriguez, the minister said. Do you take Marcus Chen to be your husband? I do, I said, smiling at the man who'd walked into my life 6 months ago and shown me what healthy love looked like. Marcus was everything Dad had convinced me I didn't deserve: kind, patient, supportive, and completely accepting of my complicated history. He'd met me during a library program about local history, where he'd been researching his own family tree. We'd bonded over genealogy databases and slowly fallen into the kind of love I'd only read about in books. By the power vested in me, the minister continued, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus kissed me while our small wedding party cheered. Cassian and Miranda, the girls in their flower girl dresses, Mrs. Rodriguez from the library, and a handful of friends I'd made over the past year. It was a tiny wedding, but it was perfect because it was filled with people who truly loved us. As we posed for photos beside Mom's headstone, something that would have seemed morbid to others but felt right to us, I caught sight of a familiar figure watching from a distance. Dad stood at the edge of the cemetery, wearing civilian clothes and looking uncertain. I excused myself from the photographer and walked over to him, with Marcus at my side. Hello, I said carefully. Hello, Elena. Dad's voice was different, quieter, more tentative. I hope you don't mind that I came. I heard through the family that you were getting married today. How are you here? I thought, early release for good behavior. 3 weeks ago. Dad looked at Marcus. I wanted to meet the man who's going to take care of my daughter. Marcus extended his hand. Marcus Chen. Elena's told me a lot about you. Dad shook it, wincing slightly. Nothing good, I'm sure. Actually, Marcus said diplomatically. She's told me about someone who made mistakes but is trying to do better. I looked at my new husband in amazement. We'd talked about Dad many times, but I'd never described him that generously. I don't deserve that kindness, Dad said quietly, but I'm grateful for it. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before Dad spoke again. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to see you happy. He looked between Marcus and me. You are happy, aren't you? Very, I said honestly. Dad nodded. Good. That's all your mother ever wanted for you. He started to turn away, then stopped. Elena, if you ever want to try, if you ever think we could, he struggled with the words. I'm in therapy now, group counseling for men with anger issues, and individual sessions. I'm trying to understand how I became the kind of man who could hurt the people he was supposed to protect. I felt Marcus's hand squeeze mine supportively. That's good, Dad, I said, using the word deliberately. I hope it helps you. It's a start. He looked at Cassian, who had approached quietly. Both of you. I hope someday you can forgive a foolish old man who spent too many years being angry at the wrong people. We're not there yet, Cassian said honestly, but we're not closed to the possibility. Dad nodded, seeming to accept this as more than he deserved. I should let you get back to your wedding, he said. Congratulations, Elena. You deserve all the happiness in the world. As he walked away, Marcus asked quietly, Are you okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. I am. The rest of the wedding reception was held in Cassian's backyard, under string lights that Miranda had hung between the trees. As we danced to our first song as a married couple, I caught sight of the girls teaching some of the other children a complicated clapping game. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, following my gaze. Family, I said. How it's not about blood or DNA or who raised you. It's about who chooses to love you and who you choose to love back. Are you having second thoughts about marrying into my crazy family? Marcus teased. I laughed. His parents had flown in from California and had spent the entire weekend spoiling Cassian's girls and telling embarrassing stories about Marcus's childhood. They'd welcomed me with the same easy warmth that Miranda had shown, making me feel like I'd been part of their family for years, rather than months. Never, I said. I'm just thinking about how different my life is now compared to what I thought it would be. Better or worse? Impossible to compare, I said honestly. It's like asking me to compare a prison cell to a garden. They're completely different universes. Marcus spun me around, making my dress flare out around my legs. So, what's next for Mrs. Chen? He asked. I grinned at my new name. I was thinking maybe we could start planning that honeymoon trip to Ireland you mentioned, and maybe after that we could talk about grad school applications. Library science? Actually, I was thinking social work, maybe specializing in family reunification or domestic violence counseling. Marcus's face lit up. You want to help other people the way Cassian helped you, the way we all helped each other, I corrected. No one gets through trauma alone. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone home and the girls had fallen asleep on the couch, I found myself in the kitchen with Miranda and Cassian, cleaning up the remnants of the celebration. I can't believe you're actually married, Miranda said, drying a champagne glass. 6 months ago, you could barely order food in a restaurant without asking permission first. People change, I said, loading plates into the dishwasher. Some people change, Cassian corrected. You chose to change. That's different. So did you, I pointed out. You could have stayed angry about being given up. You could have chosen to believe Dad's lies about me. Instead, you chose to investigate, to protect me, to build a relationship with a sister you'd never met. We all chose each other, Miranda said, smiling. That's what makes us a real family. As Marcus and I drove to our hotel that night, a charming bed and breakfast where we'd spend our first night as a married couple before flying to Ireland, I reflected on the conversation. Choice. That's what everything came down to. Mom had chosen to protect us both, even though it cost her everything. Cassian had chosen to come find me, even though it meant disrupting his comfortable life. Miranda had chosen to welcome me, even though it meant sharing her husband's attention with a traumatized stranger. Marcus had chosen to love me, even knowing about my complicated past. And I had chosen to trust them all. Chosen to believe I deserved love. Chosen to build a future instead of hiding from the past. Penny for your thoughts? Marcus asked as we pulled into the hotel parking lot. Just thinking about choices, I said. How every moment we get to choose who we want to be. Who do you want to be tomorrow? I smiled. Your wife, Cassian's sister, Sophia and Emma's aunt, Elena Rodriguez Chen, who helps families find their way back to each other. Sounds like a pretty amazing person. She's getting there, I said, kissing my husband. One choice at a time. That night, as I fell asleep in Marcus's arms, I thought about Mom's diary one more time. All those entries filled with pain and regret and impossible choices, but also filled with love. Love that had survived everything Dad had done to try to destroy it. I'd started this journey by finding a secret in an old diary. I was ending it by writing the first page of a new story. A story where love won, where families could be healed, where broken people could choose to become whole. It wasn't the ending Mom had been able to write for herself, but it was the ending she'd made possible for us. And that was everything. The next morning, Marcus and I sat in the hotel restaurant, planning our day before catching our flight to Dublin. I was scrolling through my phone when I saw a text from an unknown number. Elena, this is your cousin Bethany, Derek's sister. I know we haven't spoken since the whole situation with Uncle Richard, but I wanted to reach out. I've been doing some thinking about everything that came out during the trial, and I owe you an apology. I also wanted you to know that not everyone in the family thinks you were wrong. Some of us are just taking longer to process everything. I hope you're doing well. Maybe we could talk sometime. I showed the text to Marcus. Looks like the family healing extends beyond just you and Cassian, he observed. Maybe, I said cautiously. It's going to take time, and some of them might never come around. But some of them might. Yeah, some of them might. I typed back a simple response. Hi, Bethany. Thank you for reaching out. I'm doing very well. I'd be open to talking when you're ready. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was possibility. And possibility, I'd learned, was often the first step toward healing. 3 hours later, we were on a plane to Ireland, beginning our honeymoon and the next chapter of our life together. As the plane took off, I looked down at the city where I'd been reborn from my father's daughter into my own person. My phone buzzed with one more message. This one from Cassian. Have an amazing trip. Can't wait to hear all about your adventures. Mom would be so proud of how far you've come. I texted back. She'd be proud of all of us. Thank you for saving me, big brother. Thank you for letting me, he replied. I closed my eyes and settled back against Marcus's shoulder, feeling the plane carry us toward whatever adventures awaited. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was excited by it, because I'd learned the most important truth of all. When you're surrounded by people who choose to love you, when you've learned to choose love over fear, there's no limit to what you can become. The diary that had started this whole journey was tucked safely in my suitcase, along with Mom's letters and some of the adoption documents that had brought Cassian back into my life. Not because I needed them anymore, but because they were part of our story. The painful parts and the beautiful parts, all woven together into something that had ultimately made us stronger. I was Elena Rodriguez Chen now, wife, sister, daughter, friend. But most importantly, I was someone who had learned that family isn't about perfection or control or fear. It's about choice. It's about love. It's about protecting each other and celebrating each other and never giving up on each other. And that's a story worth living. As our plane crossed over the Atlantic, carrying us toward new adventures and new memories, I whispered a silent thank you to the woman whose diary had changed everything. Thank you, Mom, for loving us enough to make the hardest choices imaginable. Thank you for keeping me safe until I could save myself. Thank you for making sure Cassian and I would find each other when we were ready. And thank you for showing us that love, real love, is the most powerful force in the universe. Even stronger than the men who try to destroy it. 5 years after finding Mom's diary, I stood in the graduation ceremony at State University, wearing a master's cap and gown. In the audience, I could see my entire chosen family. Marcus holding our 6-month-old daughter, Sophie. Cassian and Miranda with their girls, now 13 and 11. My in-laws who'd flown in from California. Mrs. Rodriguez from the library. And even Bethany, who'd slowly rebuilt a relationship with me over the years. Elena Rodriguez Chen, the dean called out, Master of Social Work, specializing in family reunification services. As I walked across the stage to accept my diploma, I caught sight of one more person in the audience. Dad sat in the back row, wearing a suit that looked too big for his frame. He'd been out of prison for 3 years now, and we'd slowly, carefully begun rebuilding some kind of relationship. It wasn't the father-daughter bond I dreamed of as a child, but it was honest, real, based on who we actually were, rather than who we pretended to be. After the ceremony, as we all gathered for photos, Dad approached cautiously. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Your mother would be too. Thank you, I said, meaning it. He handed me a small wrapped package. I wanted to give you this. Inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before. Mom holding a newborn baby, her face radiant with joy and love. That's you, the day you were born, Dad said quietly. I found it when I was cleaning out some old boxes. Look at how happy she was. I stared at the photo, seeing myself through Mom's eyes for the first time, not as a burden or complication, but as pure joy. This is perfect, I whispered. She loved you so much, Dad said, his voice breaking slightly. I'm sorry I ever made you doubt that. Later, as we celebrated at Cashin's house, I found myself in the nursery, feeding baby Sophie while looking at Mom's photo on the wall beside her crib. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, appearing in the doorway. About stories, I said. About how every family has them. Some are tragedy, some are comedy, some are mystery. Ours started as a horror story, but look how it ended up. Marcus sat down beside me, watching our daughter's tiny fingers curl around mine. What kind of story do you want Sophie to have? An adventure story, I said without hesitation, full of love and courage and choices, where she knows from day one that she's wanted and valued and capable of anything she dreams of. Sounds like a bestseller to me, I laughed. The sequel to How Elena Found Her Family and Lost Her Fear. What would you call Sophie's book? I looked down at our perfect daughter, already planning all the ways we'd make sure she felt safe and loved and free. The girl who never had to wonder if she was worthy of love, I said, because she'll grow up knowing the answer is always yes. Marcus kissed the top of my head. I like that story. Me too, I said, rocking our daughter gently. Me too. Outside, I could hear the sound of Cassian's girls playing in the backyard with their cousins, and Miranda laughing at something someone had said, and all the beautiful noise of a family dinner on a Sunday afternoon. It was the sound of home, real home, the kind Mom had dreamed of but never gotten to experience. But we'd made it real for the next generation, and that felt like the most important ending of all. The diary still sat on my bookshelf, all these years later. Sometimes visitors would ask about it, and I'd tell them the story of how one woman's secret changed everything for her children, how love found a way to survive even the worst circumstances, how families can be broken and rebuilt and made even stronger. But mostly, I just kept it as a reminder that every choice matters. Every act of courage, no matter how small, can change the course of someone's life. Every person who chooses love over fear makes the world a little bit better. Mom's diary had given me back my brother, my sense of self, and my future. But most importantly, it had taught me that we all have the power to write our own endings, and mine, finally, was exactly what it should be. Happy.